Hello and welcome. Elementals is a multi-volume series published by Comico from 1984 until the end of the company in 1997. The series was created by Bill Willingham, who also illustrated a number of issues. That said, it was scripted and drawn by others, with Willingham providing the plots. So Willingham was the driving, creative force for the first volume and a significant part of the second. After Willingham sold the property, the Elementals get weird, questionable, and way off-brand. However, let's start at the beginning and work our way forward to its decline. Prior to launching Elementals, Bill Willingham worked as an artist for TSR, the company that published the popular tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons. One of the projects he worked on was the one-page D&D strips that doubled as an advertisement for the game. These primarily ran in Marvel titles. It's safe to say, if you have a Marvel comic from 1981 or 1982, you'll have one of these strips inside. While working at TSR, Willingham was trying to get into comics. Elementals was developed during this time. They were inspired by the elemental forces in D&D, although with a superhero edge. Originally, Willingham produced 6 pages with these characters just to show editors he could do comic book art. However, after seeing these pages, the small press publisher, Noble, asked him to create a story with those characters, which Willingham did, but that company folded before anything was printed. Skipping ahead, Elementals finally appeared in Justice Machine Annual from Texas Comics. This was the only comic published by that company, and it immediately folded afterwards. Regardless, that appearance gives a brief origin of the team, their powers, and it pits them against a minion of the antagonist, Saker. It's a very solid effort by Willingham, and quite honestly, his artwork is equally solid. It may be the work of a developing talent, but it shows a lot of promise. In fact, I'd say it has a Michael Golden edge to it, with a great use of shadows and facial expressions. The characters all read quite distinct, with traits that will carry over into the ongoing series. Their origin is quite brief, but it will be filled out in the first regular series. We learn that all 4 died at the same time, in accidents that correspond to their elemental powers. There is Jeanette Crane, aka Morningstar, who controls fire. Jeff Murphy, aka Vortex, controls air. Tommy Zucra, aka Monolith, is earth, and Rebecca Golden, aka Fathom, is water. When they died, they were resurrected by the elemental powers of the universe to combat Saker and restore order. Although they don't really know why they were created, they were on their own to figure things out. This somewhat reflects Willingham's approach to writing the comic. He didn't have much planned out in terms of an overall story. So like the characters, he was making this up as he went along. Naturally, this would change over time. The new publisher, Comico, was the perfect place for the series. It had just moved into Color Comics, and it was considered a solid publisher with a lot of promise. Along with Matt Wagner's Mage and Grendel, as well as the Robotech series and Johnny Quest, Elementals filled out Comico's diverse lineup. The one thing you'll notice, even nowadays, is Elementals feels like a different kind of superhero comic. It's hard to put into words why that seems to be the case. It has a somewhat enigmatic presence that defies explanation. But it works, that should be highlighted. Whatever quality it contains, it just works. If I had to define it, I suppose I would say it feels organic and identifiable. Perhaps my nostalgia colors that perception, but I stand behind that statement. Elementals feels and reads differently than any other superhero comic. The first 5 issues set the stage for the series. It gives the team its purpose. It opens with the addition of Porter Scott, an FBI agent who's been sent to monitor these 4 individuals. Since their first appearance, there have been other elemental types of incidents. These seem a bit too specific to be considered accidents. Essentially, the government is wondering how concerned they should be about these superheroes. Over lunch, to talk about these concerns, a team of villains, the Destroyers, attack the team and coerce them into surrendering. They are taken and transported to Nacht Island, Saker's base of operation. Well, eventually. They do escape and cause a lot of grief. but Saker intervenes, and the elementals become his prisoners. They remain in captivity for the next year. Yes, you heard that right. For the next year, they are the prisoners of Saker. During this time, Saker doesn't coerce or indoctrinate the elementals into joining him. He simply talks to them, although with a threatening undertone. He reveals his origin and what he plans to do. Saker intends to bring about the apocalypse, murder billions, and weed the human race down to the best of the best. Naturally, the team is reluctant to participate in genocide and creating a totalitarian dystopia. They manage to escape and try to stop Saker before he can activate the Shadow Spear, a supernatural weapon that will unleash destructive evil on the world. The team fails. However, Saker is defeated and condemned to hell. Unfortunately, the Shadow Spear is active and it mindlessly wanders the planet. It will go on to influence random acts of unkindness, many of which the elementals will address. This will be the foundation of all their subsequent adventures. Between issues 4 and 5, Willingham suspended production of the comic to negotiate a better contract with Comico. This led to a 6-month delay between issues 4 and 5. The original contract was an unprofessional, cut-and-paste job that didn't specify important details, such as payment schedule, royalties, and publishing frequency. These details were hammered out over a number of months, resulting in a better deal for Willingham, at least on paper. In a few years' time, Comico's bankruptcy and acquisition will become a headache for Willingham and other Comico creators. Regardless, this delay left readers hanging for the conclusion to the original storyline. For about the first 20 issues, the series is rather consistent. It's filled with a lot of interesting moments that illustrate its unique appeal. The team itself is not at all proactive. Generic crime fighting doesn't interest them in the slightest. In fact, they lapse into melancholy and become bored zombies when there isn't a huge, supernatural danger to fight. They simply wait until a threat gets their attention or comes directly to them. They don't go out of their way to find bad guys. They may seem normal on the surface, and they act like typical people, but they live with the trauma of knowing they died. Well, to be accurate, they were killed by a higher power to become their eternal servants. They cannot die again. No matter what injury they suffer, they'll survive and heal over time. This might make them a touch overconfident, but it doesn't make them reckless. This ability to suffer and survive grievous injury adds more trauma to the foundation of trauma they deal with every day. There are a few things to note. The language is a lot looser than in a typical superhero comic. It's not fully adult, but there are words a code-approved book wouldn't be allowed to use. In the second volume, the language gets a touch more adult. The violence is brutal. It's not splatterpunk or anything excessive, but it's not bloodless. Again, it's a few degrees more violent than a code-approved title. And there is sex, a topic most superhero comics avoided entirely. Like the violence, it's done tastefully and highlights how these people are still human with ordinary appetites. A few issues stand out to illustrate Elemental's uniqueness. Issue 9 explores the popularity and fame the Elementals have attained from their appearance in the world. They attract attention and disdain like any celebrity. They don't shun the spotlight, but they're not very good at being media darlings either. Issue 12 delves into Tommy's mind. In a dream, he encounters Saker, and we learn of the Elemental's possible future. They end up warring with one another over many, many centuries. Issue 14 is a typical day-in-the-life episode. The team tries to be normal people, doing normal things. But who and what they are makes that impossible. They are not normal. They are powerful, animated corpses, pretending to be normal. This issue also introduces the ridiculous vampire, Captain Cadaver. His origin is a parody of a certain, well-known Bat character. He'll show up a few issues later to cause mayhem. Issue 19 and 20 introduce the wizard, Ambrose, who will become prominent in the second volume. Finally, in issue 23, the team meet Thor. Instead of speaking Shakespearean English like his Marvel counterpart, he has a more modern British accent. Like Captain Cadaver, he's kind of ridiculous and amusing, and both will appear in larger roles in the second volume. After the 20th issue, Willingham's involvement greatly diminishes. He gives up art chores entirely by issue 17. For the most part, Jill Thompson takes over the art and Jack Herman scripts the series. Until the series concludes with the 29th issue, it wanders without a specific direction. Mostly, it's solo stories, focused on various members. The quality is okay, but it certainly doesn't have the vibe and atmosphere of the earlier issues. Bridging the gap between the first series and the second is Elemental Special number 2. This sees the return of Willingham on story and art. It takes some of the earlier random story beats and provides a direction for the next volume. As for why the title was rebooted, that probably comes down to getting a sales boost more than anything. At this point, the publisher, Comico, was quickly falling apart and needed loads of cash. Comico had expanded into mainstream newsstand distribution. This expansion cost a lot of money and put the company into severe financial debt. As a result, they canceled a number of titles. Reportedly, creators were getting late payments, and Comico owed their printer $700,000. They had to make a deal with DC for printing and distribution just to continue being a publisher. Let's put it this way. If you glanced at the wall, you'd see a lot of writing on it. The future was looking pretty bleak. With the return of Willingham writing the series, Elemental seems to become whole again. To put it bluntly, it becomes cohesive after treading water for a number of months. The first story arc sees the team going to another dimension to confront someone out to eliminate them. The second arc has the team taking on yet another threat that wants to see them dead. The second story is highly anti-religious. Specifically, it greatly criticizes TV evangelists and their power and influence. It lacks a high degree of nuance, and it ties into real-world antics going on at the time. This is where an unusual subplot comes out of nowhere. Morningstar's been carrying on a relationship with Eric Chessman, a minor character that has barely been featured. Anyway, Chessman and Morningstar get engaged before he reveals he's actually Shapeshifter, one of Saker's former minions. So to Morningstar's surprise, she's actually been carrying on an implied lesbian relationship with someone who wants her dead. It's an edgy development that's supposed to shock the audience because of the same-sex kiss, and the knowledge that she's been bumping nasties with someone pretending to be male. Now, there's a lot of wrong to unpack here. Foremost is the entire non-consensual angle, and, through a modern lens, perhaps a few levels of phobia. Due to certain restrictions I face, I have to leave it at acknowledging these elements and then move along without further elaboration. It gets creepier when, in an emotionally compromised state, Morningstar marries Ambrose a few days later. This happens after it's revealed he's been intimately watching her for quite some time. So, she marries her stalker. It's not a great subplot. The next major development is the Oblivion War, which is an unintentionally ironic title since the series quickly spirals into oblivion soon after it begins. Briefly, a large object appears behind the moon. This object launches various attacks on Earth, and the elementals specifically. In response, all the known and previously unknown superpowers, both good and evil, band together to address this otherworldly threat. This massive story, which begins in issue 10, was unresolved when the title was cancelled with the 26th issue in 1993. From the available information, it appears Willingham left after issue 15, and that's when the title begins to fall apart. The series was relaunched in 1995, and it avoided the dangling Oblivion War plot. The following year, once this new series crashed and burned after only 3 issues, Comico published How the War Was Won, a 2-part series that finally resolved the Oblivion War. By that point, no one cared. After issue 15, Elementals wasn't just a mess, it was a full-on shit show. To understand how and why that happened, we have to take a look at what was going on at Comico. Here's where the history of Elementals becomes tied to the fate of Comico. Unfortunately, that connection results in the rapid decline of the title into something unrecognizable. Comico declared bankruptcy in 1990. Like with the publishing deal with DC, this came as a surprise to every creator working for the company. None knew beforehand that the company was in deep trouble. The owners of Comico washed their hands of the problem and sold everything to an individual named Andrew Rev. Ostensibly, Rev stepped in to reorganize the company, provide leadership and financial support, and get Comico out of bankruptcy. The exact opposite happened, and this acquisition became a legal nightmare for everyone involved. Out of frustration with Comico's secret deals, and possibly late payment for his work, Willingham sold the rights to Elementals to Rev and walked away from the series. This resulted in a year gap between issues 15 and 16. As an indication of how, let's call it, questionable the company had become, Willingham continued to receive credit in solicitations for future issues, even though he had no involvement whatsoever. According to Willingham, in an article he wrote in Amazing Heroes, his involvement with the series is spotty after he sold Elementals. He provided scripts up to and including issue 22, but their publishing order was mixed up, if they were used at all. The script and art for issue 18 became the first sex special. Issue 17 contained a story Willingham had not written, despite being credited. Basically, after the 15th issue, it's hard to say how much of Willingham's original work is actually in the series, or how much was written or rewritten by someone else, but credited to Willingham. It's a mess, and it was possibly illegal due to false advertising practices, and most certainly unethical. But Elementals was just beginning to be exploited. Notoriously, there were 4 sex specials and an additional lingerie issue to capitalize on the Elementals name. For the sake of accuracy, Willingham did do the first issue of the sex special, but it was intended to be part of the regular series. It was the publisher who decided to publish it as a salacious, standalone special, and then follow it up with more sleazy, cheesecake material that pandered to thirsty fans. Essentially, the new owner of Comico did their best to exploit the only property they owned, and they did a very poor job of it. After a year gap between issues 15 and 16, 3 or more months between issues became a regular thing. Mercifully, the series finally ended in 1993 with the 26th issue. There were a few other miniseries published, some were announced and never materialized, and the property was milked to death. Finally, in 1997, Comico drew its final breath, and thankfully, it went completely out of business. According to Willingham, Jim Lee attempted to buy Elementals, presumably in the late 90s, while he was still with Image. Allegedly, he made a substantial offer, one that was above the value of the property. However, according to Willingham, Andrew Rev proposed an even larger, more ridiculous sum, and Lee walked away. Whether accurate or not, I couldn't confirm. There doesn't seem to be anything in the public record about this. One slightly obscure but persistent rumor is that Pantheon, the 13-issue series written by Willingham, is an unofficial, disguised sequel to Elementals. The implication is it's the future, intended ending to the series itself. Quite honestly, I can see how one can arrive at that conclusion. There's a large gathering of heroes and a huge conflict. One could argue either way about it being a disguised sequel or an original piece of work that seems similar to Elementals. After all, Willingham did plant the seed of an internal, apocalyptic war back in Elementals 12, so this rumor isn't without merit. File this under needs a forensic analysis at a later time. Shortly after announcing Fables was now public domain, Willingham announced that Elementals was also public domain. With Fables, well, I'm sure DC's legal team might have a few words to say about publishing rights. I would suggest proceeding with extreme caution. To a lesser degree, I would apply the same caution to Elementals. Willingham sold the rights to Andrew Rev. He doesn't legally have any say in their usage. Although I did read but couldn't confirm, there was a clause that reverted the rights back to Willingham if Comico went bankrupt. This is very plausible. Matt Wagner had a similar clause in his contract, and ultimately, after a legal battle, Grendel and Mage became his sole property. So it may take a court decision to resolve the matter of the rights to Elementals. Reading his posts concerning this, Willingham believes that Rev won't pursue any legal action. In turn, that means the Elemental copyright and trademark have been abandoned, so they're free to use. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The trademark to Elementals is active. I checked. Although it doesn't seem to be controlled by Andrew Rev. So even if Rev didn't challenge new material on copyright grounds, the trademark owner might step in and want a kickback. In other words, it might not be wise to think you can freely publish elemental material. However, there was a recent, successful Kickstarter in September of 2024. Apparently, they printed a 96-page book of elemental material. There is a PDF available for supporters, but I'm unsure if an actual physical book materialized. I've not seen it, but from the description, it appears to be an artist's edition type of thing, but that's a guess. Along the same lines, the dearly departed artist, Michael Turner, published Fathom. The lead character was someone who controlled and manipulated water. So the foundation for that character is highly similar to the Elemental's character, Fathom. This isn't a dig at Turner whatsoever, nor am I suggesting he copied the character. It's pointing out that, despite the similarities, Andrew Rev didn't legally challenge Turner. So there are two instances where a legal case could have been initiated, yet the copyright owner did nothing. This does support the abandoned copyright claim made by Willingham. Personally, I'm not a gambler, but if you are, then you can roll the dice and create elemental material with the original creator's blessing. First of all, I should mention the work of the artist, Michael Leake, who did the majority of the artwork in Volume 2. At first, it's a little rough, and it's clear he's still developing. However, over time, his work becomes very solid. To me, it gives off a Gene Ha Top 10 vibe. It's not super flashy, but it's quite detailed, with some pretty amazing figure work. From what I can tell, he didn't do a lot, only working at Comico and Valiant. After the early 90s, his resume dries up, and I'm unsure where his career went. I hope it was, and is, greatly successful. Now to finally wrap this up. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of Elementals is the lost potential. Issue 15 of the second volume outlines a direction for the team that had a lot of interesting areas to explore. Furthermore, Saker had returned. The Oblivion War was a huge threat waiting to be addressed, and there was the death of a major character. To be completely fair, despite my reservations, the majority of the work between issues 16 and 22 do read like Willingham. It seems to have his style and pacing. But they have a bittersweet appeal, knowing he did what he could before business shenanigans forced him to walk away. In not so many words, because I've used a lot in this video, the series looked like it was about to evolve in a direction that wouldn't be explored until The Authority, almost a decade later. In the end, it's an influential, unique piece of work that deserves preservation. Unfortunately, all it gets is a memorial. What take is this, Jim?
7A.
Okay, don't get excited, man. It's because I'm Canadian, I know. Thank you for watching. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge this channel finally hit 50,000 subscribers. Hooray! Strange Brain Parts is slightly more legitimate than it has been for the last 7 years. Yeah, that's my pronounced Canadian humility rising up and undermining that achievement. I can't help myself. I genuinely thank you all. If you liked the video, then give it a like. Leave a comment and get that engagement going so the algorithm takes notice. That really helps out, like a lot. If you don't like this video, well, that's cool. No hard feelings. On a personal note, I'm a solo independent producer. In less fancy terms, it's one guy who writes, researches, narrates, and edits these videos together. And I've yet to find a sponsor willing to make a legitimate offer to fund these efforts. So I greatly value everyone who ponies up their hard-earned cash so I can keep doing what I do. As an old-school DIY Gen X punk, I greatly appreciate that kind gesture, and I never take it for granted. Hopefully, that shows in the work I put out. Finally, I need to thank all my fine supporters on Patreon and YouTube. That direct support ensures I continue to produce videos just like this. If you enjoyed this video, please consider signing up for Patreon. All my links are down below. Extra special thanks to Plutocracy, Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sicken, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gaunt, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You are all justified and ancient. You're so damn hard to please. We gotta kill this switch. I'm from the 70s, but you're a 90s bitch. I don't care. I love it.